I wasn't supposed to be here. Not tonight. But the rain had other plans. The old café on the corner, the one that looked like it hadn't changed since the 70s, was my only shelter as the storm turned the city streets into rivers. I shook the water off my jacket and glanced around. The place was nearly empty, except for one table in the far corner where she sat. She looked up just as I locked eyes with her, like she'd been expecting me. Maybe she had. She was in her mid-40s, elegant, poised, but with that subtle tiredness in her eyes you don't notice at first. Her hair was streaked with silver that caught the dim light like strands of moonlight, and she wore a loose cream sweater that somehow made her look both warm and distant. I hesitated, but then I walked over. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. She smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips that held a secret. "Please." We sat opposite each other, the quiet hum of the rain outside filling the silence. It wasn't awkward exactly, just fragile, like we were both holding back something. I stirred my coffee, noticing how her hands rested on the table, steady but restless, fingers tapping in a rhythm I wanted to learn. "You didn't have to wait for the storm," she said softly. "I didn't want to leave." Her eyes caught mine, sharp and steady. "That's brave." I swallowed, suddenly aware of how close we were, how the space between us seemed charged. The air smelled of rain and old books, and for a moment, everything else fell away, the years between us, the risks, the uncertainty. "I'm not sure why I'm here," I admitted. "Maybe because you wanted to see if it was real," she said. Her words hung between us, heavy but gentle. I wanted to reach across the table, to close the gap not just physically but somehow emotionally too. But I stayed still, my heart beating too loud. The clock ticked quietly. Outside, the rain softened, but inside, a storm was brewing, quiet, electric. She leaned forward slightly, eyes searching mine. "If you kiss me," she said, voice low and steady, "there's no going back." I blinked. My mouth felt dry. 1,000 questions swirled. Is this real? Are we crazy? But beneath it all, a simple truth. I wanted her to say it again. To say it like she meant it. The café door creaked. We both looked up, startled, a man entering, dripping wet. But before the door could shut, my phone buzzed. A message. From someone I never expected to hear from tonight. My hand trembled as I picked it up. She watched me carefully, her eyes soft but unreadable. And in that moment, trapped between a past that wouldn't let go and a future I wasn't sure I deserved, I realized something: nothing about this night was simple anymore. The message blinked on my phone, but I didn't look at it again. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket and turned back to her. Her name was Mara. I'd met her a few months ago at a friend's gallery opening, and from the start, there was something magnetic about her, a quiet strength, a kind of sadness hidden behind her smile. She was a few years older than my mom. That fact alone made everything feel off limits, like walking on thin ice. Mara wasn't just older. She was experienced, with stories in her eyes that I could only guess at. I knew she'd been through hard times, a marriage that ended painfully, a daughter she rarely saw anymore. That distance haunted her, the way she spoke sometimes, as if she was half a person when she talked about family. Me? I was just trying to find my footing in the world. I just left college, still figuring out what I wanted, what I deserved. It felt ridiculous to be standing here, wanting someone so much older, someone who, honestly, should have no reason to notice me. But there was this pull between us, undeniable and dangerous. I saw it in the way Mara's eyes softened when she thought I wasn't watching, in the slight tremble of her hand when she reached for her coffee. I was sure she was wrestling with her own storm. The risk was obvious. People would talk. They already had, whispers about the young man who can't keep his eyes off the older woman. Worse, Mara's daughter was my age. I hadn't told her I knew. That silence was a secret that hung between us, heavy and fragile. And yet, none of that stopped me from stealing glances at her across the table, hoping she wouldn't notice. I wanted to ask her why she was still here, why she let herself stay when she should have walked away. But instead, I just said, "What keeps you awake at night?" Her laugh was quiet, almost sad. "Regrets," she whispered. "Things I wish I'd done differently." I nodded. "Me too. I keep thinking about chances I didn't take." She looked down at her hands, and I saw the way her fingers curled into the wood like holding onto something invisible. For a moment, I thought maybe we were just two lost souls finding refuge in a storm. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle drizzle. The café's yellow light made her skin glow softly. Without thinking, I reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Her eyes met mine, wide and unguarded. That small touch said more than words ever could. We held that silence, a fragile bubble where time stopped, and the world outside didn't exist. Then, quietly, she whispered, "If this is wrong, I don't want to be right." I swallowed hard, the weight of everything, fear, desire, hope, pressing down on me. And just like that, the line between what we wanted and what we were allowed to have blurred. I thought the small moment between us would stretch out forever, but then my phone buzzed again. This time I couldn't ignore it. A new message: "Are you really doing this? Think about what you're risking." My stomach twisted. I barely knew who sent it, but the words hit like a punch. Mara caught the flicker in my eyes. "Is that nothing?" I forced a smile, but it felt brittle. "Just some friend checking in." She nodded, but her jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have to hide this." I wanted to believe her, but the truth was louder than her words. Hiding was all we had, for now. Then the café door opened again, and I froze. It was Max, my roommate. Too loud, too familiar, stepping inside soaked from the rain. He spotted me immediately, waving like the world's biggest idiot. "Hey! You didn't tell me you were here," he said, heading straight for our table. Mara's eyes flicked toward the door, and I could see it, a flash of panic, like someone suddenly realizing the game was up. "Max, this is Mara," I said, swallowing hard. He shook her hand, oblivious to the tension, and plopped down beside me. "So, what's the story? You two look like you're in some secret spy mission." Mara smiled politely, but I caught the subtle glance we exchanged, the question hanging between us: how much does he know? Max started asking about my plans, about Mara's work, about everything but what mattered. I kept my answers vague, trying not to crack under the weight of his casual intrusion. But inside, my thoughts were a mess. Is this crazy? Are we crazy? What happens when he puts the pieces together? Mara caught my eye again, and in that look, I saw hesitation, like she was fighting an urge to pull back, to protect herself before it got messy. I wanted to reach for her hand again, to erase the distance growing between us. But I didn't. Instead, she stood up abruptly, grabbing her coat. "I should go," she said, voice tight. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Wait." She hesitated, looking down at the floor. Then, slowly, she looked up. "I'm scared," she said, just above a whisper. I took a step closer, reaching out, but before I could touch her, the doorbell chimed again, another customer. Mara took that moment to slip out, leaving me with my heart racing and 1,000 questions burning in the silence she left behind. Max looked at me, confused. I couldn't say a word. Because right now, everything was tangled: desire and fear, hope and guilt. And if I crossed that line, there really would be no going back. I hadn't seen Mara for 2 days. The silence between us stretched like a chasm I didn't know how to cross. My phone stayed silent too, no texts, no calls. That quiet was louder than anything she could have said. Then last night, I found myself standing outside her apartment, heart hammering like I'd run a marathon. The hallway was dim, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl with anticipation. I hesitated, fingers tightening around the doorbell. When she opened it, she looked tired, more vulnerable than before, but her eyes caught mine like a spark in the dark. I wasn't going to answer, she said quietly. I needed to see you, I admitted. She stepped aside, letting me in. The air was thick with things unsaid, and when she closed the door behind me, I felt like I'd crossed an invisible line. We sat on the couch, neither of us moving for a moment. Then, suddenly, she laughed, but it wasn't light. It was sharp, laced with frustration. You think this is easy for me, she snapped, voice trembling. I've spent years pretending I don't want something real, something that scares me. I reached out, brushing my thumb against her hand. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching, desperate. But what about my daughter? What about everything I'm supposed to protect? I swallowed. The weight of the unspoken hit me hard. I don't want to hurt anyone. But I can't pretend I don't want you. She bit her lip, a flash of something raw and real crossing her face, maybe fear, maybe longing. And then, out of nowhere, her voice dropped, fierce and broken. You don't get to come here and make me feel like I'm some girl again. I'm not. I know, I whispered. I don't want to erase who you are. I just want to be part of it. For a heartbeat, we just looked at each other, 1,000 words caught in our gazes. Then, from the bedroom, the sharp sound of a text alert broke the moment. Mara's hand trembled as she grabbed her phone. I saw the screen light up with a name I hadn't expected, David. Her ex. The man who still held pieces of her past. Her eyes flicked to me, conflicted, and then she said the words that made my chest tighten, I'm still not free. I wanted to say everything, that she was enough, that I didn't care about the past. But instead, I just reached for her, my fingers brushing her cheek. Her breath hitched. She whispered, if you kiss me, there's no going back. And just as I leaned in, the front door slammed open. The door slammed so hard it echoed through the apartment. Mara pulled away from my touch, her eyes wide with shock, but the surprise on the face of the man standing there was even more intense. David. Her ex. He wasn't just back. He looked furious, like every muscle in his body was ready to explode. What the hell is going on here? David demanded, voice low and dangerous. I stood up, feeling the sudden heat of adrenaline. I'm just, save it, Mara snapped, stepping in front of me like a shield. David, this isn't the time. He ignored her, his gaze sharp as a knife. So this is why you've been so distant. Seeing him behind my back. The air thickened with tension. Mara's face flushed with anger and something deeper, guilt. Fear. I wanted to speak, to say she deserved better than the chaos David brought, but the words stuck in my throat. David's eyes locked on mine, burning with accusation. You don't know what you're getting into. I know exactly what I want, I said, voice steady despite the storm inside me. Mara's hands shook as she reached for David's arm. Please, don't do this here. He yanked away, stepping closer. I'm the one she's married to. That word, married, slammed into me like a brick wall. She hadn't told me. How could I have missed it? Or worse, did she not want me to know? Mara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. It's complicated. I felt the ground shift beneath me. The woman I thought I was falling for was still tethered to someone else, someone who still claimed her. David's voice cracked with pain. I thought we could fix this. And I told you it was over, Mara said, voice shaking. I wanted to run, to escape the messy collision of their past and present. But I stayed. Because despite everything, despite the lies, the secrets, I couldn't let her go. She looked at me, desperation and sorrow battling in her gaze. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, hurt cutting through my voice. Because I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid you'd leave. I swallowed hard, torn between anger and understanding. The room felt smaller, heavier, full of all the things left unsaid. David stepped back, exhaustion and defeat written on his face. I'm not giving up. Mara's hand found mine, fingers tightening around mine like a lifeline. I don't know what will happen next, she said softly, but I want to try. With you. And in that moment, the world outside might have been falling apart. But here, in the middle of chaos, we chose to hold on. The weight of everything pressed down on us, past mistakes, unspoken fears, and the raw truth hanging in the air like smoke. Mara's grip on my hand was tight, desperate. I could feel the tremble in her fingers, the same tremble I knew was in my own heart. David's footsteps faded behind us as he left the apartment, but the shadow of his presence lingered, impossible to ignore. We sat on the couch again, the silence thick but different now, not fragile, but charged, honest. I'm scared, Mara said finally, voice small. Scared that if I choose this, I'm breaking everything. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the woman who'd pulled me into this mess, but the woman who had survived it. You're not breaking anything that was real, I said. You're just making room for something new. She swallowed hard, eyes glassy. I want that. I want us. But what if it hurts? What if it's a mistake? I shrugged, the truth coming out raw and simple. Maybe it is. But maybe it's worth the risk. We both laughed softly, the sound shaky but genuine. For a moment, the world outside didn't exist. Then Mara leaned forward, her forehead resting against mine. No promises, she whispered. None, I agreed. But in that quiet, tangled space between us, I knew we had crossed a line we couldn't uncross. We didn't need words. Not yet. Because some things are understood best in silence, in the trembling of hands, the catching of breath, the hesitant brush of lips that might come tomorrow, or maybe never. The storm had passed, but the air was still thick with possibility. And as I sat there, holding her close, I realized that love, messy, uncertain, terrifying love, was the only thing worth holding on to. Days passed in a blur, some moments bright with hope, others shadowed by doubt. Mara and I didn't have easy answers. We had no clear roadmap out of the mess that was our lives. But we had each other. We met whenever we could, stolen afternoons, quiet dinners, long talks that stretched into the night. Every glance, every touch was a reminder that we were choosing something fragile but real. Mara's past didn't disappear. There were phone calls I didn't answer, words I didn't understand. But slowly, she began to open up, not just about David, but about the woman she was beneath all the armor, a mother afraid of losing her child, a woman scared of starting over. And me? I learned what it meant to be patient, to love someone who carried scars deeper than I could see. I learned how to listen without trying to fix everything, how to hold space for pain without turning away. We weren't perfect. We argued. We faltered. But every time I saw Mara's smile, the genuine one that came after the storm, I knew it was worth it. One evening, sitting on her balcony watching the city lights flicker, she turned to me and said, "We're not who we thought we were." I smiled. No. We're something better. The future wasn't certain. Maybe David would fight for her. Maybe the world would judge us. Maybe we'd make mistakes we couldn't take back. But in that moment, wrapped in the quiet hum of life around us, there was a promise. Not of forever. But of right now. And sometimes, that's all we need.